too much of we never get done. All right. Hello, all my beautiful souls out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I'm super excited, as I always am. Everyone says that before every fucking show. So anyway, I hope this one is like super badass. And we're going to talk a lot about Jesus and those damn Christian people who seem to have attached themselves to him for some bizarre, unbeknownst reason. Today, I have Stuart Delony with me. He's the host of the Snarky Faith podcast / radio show. And it is pretty snarky. I do have to say so myself. Stuart, how are you today?
I'm great, Devan, and I'm excited to be here hanging out with you and talking about all sorts of stuff today.
All sorts of things. And so I don't remember where the fuck I discovered you at or how. I don't know. I just be on the internet digging up shit, and somehow I came across, maybe I did like a religious search on Apple or something, and then I came across your podcast, Snarky Faith, and then I looked at some of the show titles and everything like that, and I was just as fascinated as I could be. So just to read, we're going to actually talk about your podcast towards the end of the show because I want to talk about a couple of documentaries first. But I do want to read the description you have for your podcast just as a little titty teaser for my beautiful audience. And I quote Stuart, Snarky Faith is a space where we irreverently, haven't had my wine today, irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spiritualities. It is a skewering of religion and culture today. The questions are even, answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation, end the quote. And we'll jump back on that later. So one of your major themes that I came across for you is this, you've coined this term, the insanity in Christianity. And I'm just wondering what that means to you.
Well, part of it has to do with a bit of my past too. I was raised in the South. I was raised in around the Atlanta metro area. Was raised around conservative Christianity for the most part, and then for some odd reason decided to get into ministry for a number of years. I worked like 20 years in church ministry, and began, the further I was working in there, began to see just the weird, crazy dysfunction. Like the idea that there is the stuff that Jesus talks about, and then there's the stuff that like Christians talk about in politics, and those two things, those don't really match up at all. And and so that just started kind of ticking me off over the while of being able to say, wait a second, I know you guys have Jesus bumper stickers or t-shirts, but nothing about what you're doing seems like you understand the simple teachings of Jesus. So, yes, my job a lot of times I feel like is to be able to point out the insanity, to be able to say, that's not what Christ talked about. Which is a lot of American Christianity.
Right. And that is our task because, our market is not, I feel like I could speak for you when I say this, our market is not the church, is not church people. Our market are people who are considering their path and pondering, and whose minds have a risk of being overthrown by the way Christianity is branded, especially here in the States. And so when people like us rise up and go, there's another approach to God, this foolery that we're seeing play out before our eyes is in him. And so I don't want people to actually believe that this is all God is reduced to, is evangelical and Republican philandering, and cocaine orgies and whatever the hell else they do. I don't judge it for the cocaine orgies, Mr. Matt Gaetz and, Mr. Wannabe Speaker of the House, because I've had a few of those myself, but I wasn't judging people.
You weren't oppressing people for the things that you were doing, which that ticks me off like more than anything. It does. I've never understood that. So for people to kind of, and that's a weird part about Christianity. I think that for lack of a better term, the inbred nature of a lot of the thought processes that go on within there, I think it keeps people in a space where they feel like they have to keep coming back. where they feel like it's, either fear or shame or whatever keeps you coming back, even though probably every bit of the logic in your brain is saying, this place is crazy, we got to get out. But somehow you just leave that door open, but you don't know what God's doing, which is a recipe for abuse. Anytime you kind of enter that into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the dangling carrots, the vague promises. Um, it's like when I was a drug dealer, I wasn't a shady ass drug dealer, but I hung around a bunch of shady ass drug dealers.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you always get people, like, oh, this is going to be the best thing, all these promises, or give me your money and I'll come back with even more than what I'm, more dope than what I have right now. Just let me borrow it. Just let me hold on to it for a second. It's the same energy.
Oh, I've been around some shady ass pastors, so I totally agree. That is that is the exact same energy.
And I heard you say the S word when you were referring to Jesus' ministry, which is simple. And so I just wanted to echo that, because I always like to remind people that it was a remarkable thing in one of the Gospels, and it was talking about how Jesus taught with such simplicity. I find it remarkable because they couldn't write everything down in the Bible, or even the scribes of the day. They couldn't literally account for everything in the whole day. They only wrote down what stood out to them. So the fact that Jesus' ministry being like chill was noteworthy just lets me know that the the Republicans of his day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, were being really, really extra.
Yeah.
Because there was a contrast there. Jesus wasn't showboating and causing a whole scene, except for when he threw over the temple, which I'm with him on that. And so Jesus was chilling. So when we look at Republicans, evangelicals, people who tout the name Christianity, and how hard they come for people, they're being the exact opposite of how Christ was, very humble and meek. He spoke his word, but he didn't by no means go around trying to force it upon people. And so he never did that. And so I just wanted to talk about the simplicity of the Lord.
Yes, and even in that regard, like if you talk even about the simplicity of Scripture, one of the core ideas of Scripture is choice. In the Bible, allowing people to have choice, which is really funny because Republicans don't like to allow people to have choices, to be able to go and do stuff. But that's very, very central to really a lot of the narrative of scriptures in the Bible, is that God gives people the opportunity to do stuff. God doesn't compulsively make people do things like Republicans want to do and are doing in certain places right now too, which is terrifying.
Yeah,
and they do it in the name of Jesus, which is also sickening too.
Anybody can pick up the name of Jesus and go trotting down the street with it.
I know.
What people have to get is that, when the Bible talks about wolves in sheep's clothing, it has to be somebody. When the Bible talks about the hypocrites and stuff like that, it has to be somebody. Every generation has people who claim to be of God and are not, and people who say one thing and do the opposite. It happens everywhere. So in our day and time, I believe that is our Republican Party and the Evangelical Party, and people who don't seem to have a problem with what Republicans are doing. So these are our Pharisees right now.
Oh, absolutely, because Christ talks a lot about, there is so much that is like anti-empire and anti-establishment in what Jesus is talking about the structures of power of the time. And it's funny to be able to see where we see like a lot of conservative Christians running. We want more power in government. We want more power. We want more of the empire. And that whole thing was antithetical to everything Jesus was talking about. He was trying to talk about a whole different system of power and a whole different system of living, but some of them didn't get the memo, apparently.
They can't, because, as the Lord said, if he were to open their eyes and they would see, and he would open their hearts and they would hear and they would feel, they would be human and they would be converted, but he has not given them the kingdom. And whoever the hypocrites of the day are never ever going to see fault in themselves, because it's always going to be a problem with what someone else is doing, because their minds have been overthrown, and that makes life harder for everyone else. But I choose to believe that the problems that they bring upon our lives are there to strengthen us, because there's gonna be something. If it's not them, there's gonna be the bitch next door or the bitch at the grocery store. You're gonna always have a motherfucker somewhere. so we can't escape that. And so, but it is about choice. In Deuteronomy, you know, in the Old Testament, the Lord is always trying to give Israel a choice. Choose you this day who you're going to serve, but I'm not going to force you. I hope you pick me, is what God is saying, but he never, ever, ever, ever was forceful. And my favorite example of Jesus being anti-establishment, if you will, anti-rich people, was when the lady came in with only the 2 mites and all the rich people were in there making it rain. You know, he didn't compliment them. He didn't say anything good about them. The person who made him stop in his tracks was the broke bitch. You know, the bitch bleeding from her pussy. You know, I mean that respectfully, ladies. And and, I realized how that sounded when I said it.
You mean it in love. You mean it in love. That's what.
All love. XOXO. You know, the broken people are the people who stood out to him. But in this day and time, people want to talk about the richest pastors, the richest people in the world. This is not how God is.
No, and that's, and again, like circling back to the simplicity, it really just goes back to like, how are you loving people in your area, like in your own sphere? Like, do you love your neighbor? Do you love those that aren't nice to you? I mean, they're really simple things in many ways that will change how you walk. That'll change how you even like look within yourself. When you're actually learning to deal with other people, seeing your own junk when you see other people's junk. And then, you know, the hope is that it makes you way, way, way more compassionate moving forward as you engage with other people. But at the same time, yeah, sometimes it's too simple for Christianity. We need to make it into some sort of a thing where we're drawing a line in the sand, and these are going to hell, these are going to heaven. And when they always draw the line's always on their side.
So how you went to seminary? Which seminary was it again?
I went to a Fuller Theological Seminary. It's mainly in Pasadena, but they have a few other campuses.
Yeah, because I thought I remember like World Campus or something like that in there somewhere. But I went to seminary too. I left. I didn't stay long, just only a few semesters, because the guy who taught law, he just one day he was like, yeah, we really like to control people in the church and everything like that. And oh my God, I was the only person in class who was like, I don't think we should be controlling, you know.
yes.
I don't think we should be doing that. And I did a double take, and I asked him, the fuck you say? I was speaking more seminarily and
Of course. But that's the translation of
yeah, in the Greek, that's a translation. The fuck you say? And he was like, yeah, we want to control people in the church. And he said it as casually as there's clouds in the sky, and everyone else in the class was nodding along with him besides me. And I was like, oh, hell no. I got to go.
Oh, I've had moments like that too. For me, I enjoyed the seminary I went to for the different viewpoints it pushed on me. I'm a person, I don't know if I'm just like a intellectual sadist, but I don't mind being wrong in my head. So if there's like new information out there, I don't mind messing around with it. But watching other pastors like lose their minds on like when certain professors would tell them scripture in this way or this way, like, oh, what if the creation story is not literal? And then you watch a bunch of other guys just heads blow up at that moment. But you're right. I've been in other places, not at my seminary, but when I've been to different conferences and stuff, where I've heard, back when I was a church planter, like heard people talking about gathering people together if you're planting a church. And those people, don't worry too much about them. They're scaffolding on the building that you're kind of really trying to set up here. So they're just useful tools. And if they leave, that's fine. But and hearing that, it's the most dehumanizing thing that I've ever heard about people, especially from a perspective of, we're starting a church. People that you're going to start it with, they don't matter that much, but they'll be useful idiots for a while. And that's just what gets me so much about Jesus, is that Christ saw the humanity in people. Christ didn't see them as marks or numbers or any of this stuff. And it's just gross. It's gross in so many ways how Christianity has become in this way.
I think some people start off corrupt like that. And I think some of them start off with the best of intentions, but money and power corrupts them slowly, gradually over time, much like the Ring did Smeagol in The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I don't think that cinema and all these shows we watch are just entertainment. I really think that the Lord is speaking through us through these things. The slow corruption of Anakin Skywalker and the Vader. I think that this sort of stuff happens in people in real life, although they're not running around shooting electricity out of their hands and disappearing when they put a ring on, but what does disappear? Who you used to be.
Yeah.
By the time Anakin is Vader and by the time Smeagol is Gollum, that old person is, their original, more pure form is no more. And they can't even tell you the point at which they change because it happens so subtly. In their mind, they still feel like they're just as justified today as Vader and Gollum as they were when they were Anakin and Smeagol. It's everyone else who has the problem.
No, you're right. You're right. And I've been in places where, like, yes, it feels like to stay on this track, it means I'll have to lose a part of my soul or have to swallow part of who I am in order to remain here. And that was a learning curve for me because I worked as a missionary for a while, and I was on the leadership board of their organization. And I was the guy that was always pushing back against what they were doing. And so for a season of life, I was like, oh, I'm doing God's work. I'm trying to push back and give a different perspective. And then after a while, you begin to realize, no, I'm just really being a pain in the ass to them. And they really don't want me around anymore because my perspective is too challenging to what they're talking about. And at this point, I probably just need to gracefully exit because it's just, there's that idea of, yeah, am I helping or am I just a pain in the ass? And in some places, if you're a pain in the ass, you just got to leave.
Right. And, church is just like a lot of yes men around them and stuff like that, which is something I believe I have in my notes here to, well, I'll just say it now, these churches, they surround themselves with people who agree like them and they think like them. And so they don't really want to be challenged. But the danger of that is if you don't have opposing viewpoints, you keep hearing all of these yeses and you begin to think that you're right when you objectify people like that. You think that you're right. Well, whatever it is that you do, because ain't nobody telling you no. So
but there's a danger in folks just in the audience, just similarly, like for people in the congregations, effectively taking their brains out when they hang out in church and being like, yeah, whatever he said, I agree with it. I have no idea how he got to these points. His theology's already been pre-digested and he's giving it to me. So sure, I'll take it. Even though we don't there's not that whole internal process of learning and growing in it. We just end up almost taking the regurgitated vomit like a mama spitting into a baby bird's mouth. I feel like that happens at church way too much. And I just think that would taste terrible. So, and so it pushes back on just the fact that we've taught people, like you'd mentioned, to keep them under control. And we've taught them to not really question and just listen and agree. And that's also incredibly dangerous when folks are at a position where they just agree with what the pastor's always saying.
And I used to be that guy. Honestly, I think the vomit from the mama bird would be more nutrition more nutrition.
That's true.
Than what these pastors bullshit are spewing out. But I used to be that person. I would hear something I didn't agree with, and I would say, okay, he's up there, so I'm going to change my mind to what he said rather than to critique him.
Yeah.
So, or as I learned when I was getting my hypnotist certification, that's called hypnotizing people and using it in a negative way. So, but I'm reminded, I want to throw a little bit of shade at Lakewood Church since I used to be a member.
Okay, let's do it. I'm game for that.
Before they kicked me out for not being straight. And so, so I know Joel gets on TV and acts like he's all nice and everything, but behind the scenes, they have policies in effect that really, really hurt and damage people.
Yeah.
So in terms of objectifying people, when I was volunteering in the kids ministry there, I walked back into the office one day and I heard the leader of the kids department saying something like about the volunteers to the effect of like, we're smarter than them. We get to, he was talking to the staff about the volunteers who were not in the room. I was a high level volunteer. And so I was given a lot of access to stuff, but he was saying like, basically we're really clever. We're going to use these volunteers to work ourselves out of a job, thumbs up kind of thing. He. And that didn't sit well with me, but it was
no.
It was one of those situations where I was like, I'm going to show grace and mercy. No place is going to be perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and overlook that, and I wish I hadn't done that.
It's funny because I'll do the same thing where like I replay this in my head. But if you would have been like, "Excuse me, what about this? Does anyone realize this is pretty fucked up right now?" I think no one would have said anything, and that you would have been just escorted out of the building, and that would be the end of it. Because again, yeah, you have a bunch of yes men or sheep or people that just go along with it because it sounds good, and because of course it's a church, so of course God's part of it, right? Right? And I feel like that's the assumption a lot of times, and it just creates a lot of baggage.
I'm gonna throw a little bit more shade at them, though. Because this is another form of censorship that they do.
Mhm,
So I saw this woman catch the Holy Ghost one time when I
mhm.
was in the main sanctuary at Lakewood. And look, I get some people fake dancing in the spirit. Some people don't believe in it at all. Okay, and sometimes it's real. I've had that experience like maybe less than 5 times, 4 or 5 times in my whole life. I've never been this sort of person that, Sister Sally every damn Sunday at exactly 11:15. Here she go down the aisle. No, if it's going, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna have to be like legitimate. So sometimes it's real, sometimes it's not. This woman this was real. And now she's in the largest church in America in the middle of, I'm pretty sure it was probably like the 11 a.m. service, the largest service, but it doesn't fucking matter because all the services are huge.
Mhm.
I'm like, this girl caught the Holy Ghost down in the front, of just maybe like 20, 25 rows back, maybe 15 or 20 rows back from the front, which is like nothing in a place that big.
Sure.
But she got up and the spirit was moving her, and the ushers kicked her out. And I thought, like, this was another one of those moments that I was like, okay, I don't like this, but I guess I should overlook it. I'm all like, how you gonna censor the spirit in the middle of the church? I
Yeah.
don't, I don't.
Well, that's one of the things that grabbed me early on in when I was working in ministry is that it's a production. That Sunday morning is a production, and it's about like eliminating any mess. It's about eliminating like anything that would get in the way of the production, which is really kind of sick and twisted if you really think deeply about that. Because if God is trying to reach out to humans, and we're all messed up, we've all got shit, and we're all messy. But I think that like ministry, if you're actually doing ministry with God, I mean, it's going to be messy because we're messy, and that's okay because God knows that we're messy. And and I just find it weird when we tend to like whitewash our services into making them productions or pageantry.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I always like to remind people that when these people, your worship leaders, your pastors, and I use the word pastor loosely because I don't believe many of these people are even called. I haven't heard any of their stories of their true conversion when God met them, and the books they write are never really about themselves. But remember, they're at work, and just like most people when they go to work, they're being fake as hell and putting on whatever face they need to get the job done. I just wanted to throw that out there. And
Well, and if you want to throw out that just a little addendum to what you're saying is that there are many pastors that write books that are ghostwritten as well. To where I've known of a few instances because I do have a friend that's a ghostwriter where they'll just kind of give a bunch of ideas to a person, like couple stories, couple things, and they're like, boink, go make it happen. So again, you're right. It's like this whole like Christian marketing complex that we kind of find ourselves under. That's really just about money.
there are also regurgitated sermons too, because
Mhm.
one of Joel's books I read, I was like, I heard this in a sermon before. It's just regurgitated sermons. It's a system. It's an equation that they have to constantly
Mm,
books like that, and I know that they're not writing them. I know,
mm.
I know. hmm And so I put a note here about the war on drugs because of something that you said about like government control. I felt like I was watching shit. I've consumed so many documentaries in the last like I watched the new one on Netflix, How to Change Your Mind, where the guy's going over how he used like the mescaline and the psilocybin and the MDMA and everything like that. And I watched the history of mental illnesses on
Mhm.
PBS. And it was interesting to find out how like, the psychedelics were used and being like studied in clinical settings then the government wanted to control people because people started using the psychedelics and they didn't want to fucking go to war. And then they was like, oh, we got to stop this shit. So let's make these drugs Schedule 1 narcotics, and then let's put fear in everyone about the evils of what may happen, even though people weren't really doing anything evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then I feel like the church locked arms with politicians back in those days, and then they started calling drugs the devil, the spirit of Satan and everything like that. And I don't know, I just wondered what you thought about, how deep the history of church people and politicians go and what they did to stifle America's impression of drugs.
That's a good question. I feel like that, I mean, it kind of circles back to what you'd mentioned earlier, that it all falls into some sort of a system of control. If we're able to paint a line and be able to say, oh, those in this tribe are good, but those that are outside of our tribe are bad. And they've done that on so many different social issues throughout the years. And I mean, it's been alcohol. It's been, I was even attending a church. This is when I was a missionary, but I was attending a church in an area, and I was like, oh, you guys, I would love to just start doing a bar ministry. This is like 15 years ago. Just going and hanging out with people and just talking to them, not trying to convert them, just talking to people in bars just to be able to kind of break down walls. And they were like, you can only do that as long as you're drinking a Coca-Cola or something else in that building. And I'm like, wait, I don't work here, but you guys know me, and you do not want me to go and try to share stuff with people and just get to know people in bars because alcohol. I mean, again, I feel like these are all scapegoats that we tend to demonize in so many different areas. And I think that we've seen it, especially like recently, it's probably since at least 2020 ramping up, of how the conservative right is finding, like, I feel like we're back in the satanic panic, like 2.0, like back from the 80s, when like there was this whole like, Satan's everywhere. And there's all these crazy things. I feel like we've just reinvented that, because I grew up around some of that stupidity of the satanic panic. And I feel like this is just a new version of it, or it's, a Q version of it now, or some other craziness that they're adding to it.
Well, the devil isn't particularly creative, man. He just tends to copy shit and repeat cycles. He's not really all that inventive if you think about it. And that's why I believe in the book of Revelation, when it says that when Satan's true form is like revealed, and then the nations looked at him and was like, okay, is this the nigga that was fucking with us this whole time? This little thing over here? Really? He's not that impressive.
Yes.
In terms of analyzing his mechanics, there, is he powerful and shit? Yeah. But, like this is why, perfect example, like a broke ass hustler who ain't got a penny to his damn name can talk a smooth game and get a whole lot of money from people. I've seen it happen 1,000 times when I was a drug dealer. They use what little they have, good looks, big dick, or the reputation or whatever, but zero actual fucking thing of worth in terms of money, and can get damn near anything they want. But really, he ain't shit.
Mm-hmm. And even mentioning that, and I don't. This is your interview. I don't want to go down any Revelation rabbit holes or anything like that, too. But I also feel like that's one of the books of the Bible that has messed up more people with bad interpretations and reading it. I literally, I was going before this is years back, but before my ordination hearing, and they're grilling me on all these things. And some guy asked me, and I didn't know him, and I was an idiot, but he was like, tell me about, how do you feel about the end times in the book of Revelation? And I was like, I feel that's probably done more damage to Christianity than anything in a while, because we focus on the end and we don't pay attention to what's now in this. And depending on how you read it, some people read it literally, some people see it figuratively, some people pick and choose between the two, which is a terrible way to read scripture, to hop between those two standpoints. But yes, I remember some guy got so mad at me. Explain yourself. Why is this? Because I was like, does it really matter? Does it matter what's going to happen fully in the future if we're supposed to be digging in now towards loving people and kind of walking out the simplicity of Christ? Because sometimes if we focus too far in advance, I feel like it takes us away from the present.
Or as they say in the Pentecostal churches, you don't want to be so heavenly minded that you ain't no earthly good.
Amen.
Oh my gosh. I really don't like the fact that I still have in me things from my church days, but I guess it wasn't all bad.
No, I think that's the hard thing. I think that oftentimes when people go through like deconstructing and walking through processing out their faith, we can end up kind of feeling bad or ashamed of where we were. But for me, at least, I've gone like, okay, that's what I was raised around. It's taken me time to figure out which baggage is shit and which baggage needs to stay, and kind of processing through all of that along the way, because there are nuggets that have happened, but by and large, there's probably like more dump truck loads that were not helpful. But I do think that's essential in the spiritual path of being able to figure out, yeah, what can I take from this? What good can I take from this? And then let me flush the rest of it down the toilet.
So speaking of putting on a production and a show, you had quite the choice words for the movie Through the Eyes of Miss Tammy Faye.
Oh, okay, that one. Okay, yes.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Tammy Faye Baker and Mr. Jim Baker were probably the most colorful people on television, especially over there at TBN.
Oof.
Back in the day.
PTL back in the day, which became, I think, yeah, but yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Personally, I loved it. I love the show because I like anything that exposes the foolishness of television ministry and the bullshit side of Christianity. You didn't like it though, so talk. Give me your.
Oh, my pushback on it was because I had a gullible mother who loved televangelists, and Jim and Tammy were on all of the time, and those folks, and my only issue was with the movie. I think Tammy Faye figured stuff out and went on to do good stuff. I think the movie kind of gave her a free pass of being a part of this whole whatever that was, the clusterfuck of Christianity that was going on, that was PTL. And I thought some of it film wise was just a little campy. And I wish they would have dialed down on some of the bigger stuff, because there was abuse. Like supposedly, I mean, I don't think they even hint on the fact that Jim Baker's been accused of raping someone as well too. And so there's a bunch of weirdness surrounding that, and just trying to glaze our way out towards the end. That's what kind of left me with a bad taste in my mouth, because I remember a lot of that, and I do like I appreciate how Tammy Faye changed and how she changed stuff within it, but at the same time, I thought the filmmakers were a little heavy-handed and made it just all bad Jim. But I think that there were two people that were involved in whatever that craziness was.
I wonder why that may be. Maybe they were so overwhelmed with so much bullshit that they could pick from. They just didn't know how to handle it.
No, you're right, and I've had to do that too. Like when you get raised around stuff, like I have friends that are worship pastors that have had to work through the idea that, like, wait, half of what we do all the time is almost just psychologically messing with people. Just the lights and the music and getting everyone in that right mood, and they know what they're doing with it. And you'd mentioned hypnotism earlier, and I'm not saying it's hypnotism, but it's definitely conditioning people for a situation and creating an expectation for people in the situation. So, I mean, to give Tammy Faye a fair shake, which I would say is that she may have been swallowed up in all of that, to where this is all God's work. And it is. It's very, it can be very intoxicating, and it can be something that really, like you'd mentioned earlier, turn you into a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah. There's a lot of makeup to keep on all the time. It costs money.
Oh my gosh, I felt bad for Jessica Chastain, because I think they said she's like the actress that was portraying her. She had like 4 hours a day. I'm like, oh, that sounds awful, of trying to recreate that look.
As drag queens say all the time, it takes
That's
a
true.
lot of money to look this cheap. So that's In the Eyes of Tammy Faye. You can find it on different networks and shit. I recommend it, and I love it because these people are kind of like at the beginning of the televangelical wave. So these people paved the way for your Joel Osteens and for your T.D. Jakes and for your Joyce Meyers and everything like that. It's not like I don't see similar practices, across all of these ministries. It's up to you to decide who you can trust and who you can't. But Fucks with churches. I don't walk in them. I don't know none of that no more. And I'm not bitter. I'm just logical now, and and I critique things, and it's not okay with me for these churches to rake in all this money. And I talk about Lakewood a lot because that's just where I was. Had I been at Felicia's Church of Latter-day Saints, and I would be talking about fucking Felicia, but that's not where I was. And so, to rake in all this money and then be firing volunteers for where they hang out at when they're not at church, when you're off camera. So I'm not okay with that.
It's a business. I think it's easier if you begin to see it as a business and not a church anymore.
Oh, it's a grift. And so for those of you who don't know
yeah.
what a grift is this religious shit we're talking about, or Republicans are like when Donald Trump's wife, one of his ex-wives fell her ass down the stairs and died the other day. He took to his social media platform he created and grifted. He was like, she's dead, but please donate.
Yeah.
So that's like a grift. If you want further education on what grifting is, I do recommend Miss Betty Bowers on Facebook.
Hilarious.
She's hilarious. Trademark glory, as she always says. She's very funny. Look up Miss Betty Bowers. Very funny. And so now you were on a documentary called "In God We Trump." I'm going to include a link to this in my showy notes. I watched it on Vimeo earlier. It's a good hour and a half of your life. I suggest everyone watch it. It's called "In God We Trump," and this documentary traces the parallelization. That's not a word. I've decided that it is the parallelization of Trump and evangelicals, and how basically evangelicals created the ability for Donald Trump to become the president of these United States, and then all the ass fuckery that followed. Talk to me about your experience on this documentary and why you agreed to be a part of it.
I don't know how I got involved in it in the first place, but when I heard, I think it was through a friend. I think a friend of a friend knew the documentarian and was telling me about what was going on, and he was trying to find people to talk to as he was going around the U.S. And so I reached out to him, and we became friends too through the process of it. But he was just like, "Yeah, I just want pastors that'll actually be honest about stuff that's going on here." He had a lot of conservative pastors that would not go on camera talking about what they honestly felt like. And yeah, when he traveled down here, because I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, I was part of that leg of the tour. We set up a spot and talked about it, and I do much of what I do on the radio. I just tell it like it is the way I see it. And yes, this is I mean, really what's been happening is, especially with Roe v. Wade falling recently, this has been the conservative, evangelical rights, essentially wet dream for 40 to 45 years. And so they've been moving this for years, this amongst other social issues, and trying to ingrain them within politics, because they saw politics as the way to be able to make social change happen, which is hilarious because they talk about God being the God of the universe and being all powerful, but God needs us to infiltrate the government because God's too flaccid to do anything. At least that's how I do it in my own head when they talk about it. But it's a weird, disgusting thing that began to happen. Well, that's been happening for a while. If anyone remembers, 80s, the moral majority, or Promise Keepers, all this other BS that was kind of all in the line of where we're at now, with what happened with the Supreme Court. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I feel like, because this I don't think this is in the documentary, but the Christian right was toying around with different issues that they thought would be flashpoints in culture to be able to beat their drum on. And Jerry Falwell and a bunch of them, they would try certain ones, they wouldn't work. Eventually, abortion became one of those things. Because before that, actually, evangelicals and Christians really didn't have as much of an issue with abortion with this. I mean, our country we've had abortion since the beginning of our country. But what? Well, we're founded with, what are we, we're a Christian nation. We're founded with values. They like to play around with the fact that we don't know history well. And they like to reframe history and tell us how it's going to be. But we're now at a weird point in history where I feel like the dog finally caught the car. And I don't think the Republicans know what to do with it. I think they finally got what they wanted. And now they're like, oh, all right, let's just go take more. Like, we have nothing else to do. We've already stormed the castle. Let's take more, which is also a terrifying period of time that we're moving into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sucks to be a woman right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could scoop you all up and whisk you away to the island of Lesbos, where supposedly so many of you emerge from, I would let y'all just go have all the hot lesbian sex with each other for the rest of time and just do whatever the fuck you want and invite occasional dick over or whatever. And so, but that's not gonna happen. So whatever I can to stand in solidarity with you women folk, I am more than happy to do.
And the sad part of it is, with all of this, is that it is really all a show with conservatives. I remember, this is years back when I was at a pastor's meeting in our community I was in, and this one pastor used to love to brag about how they would go and picket abortion clinics, and about what great work they're doing in the church. And I remember afterwards, I didn't like call him out in front of it, but I was like, hey, like, wouldn't it be easier? Like, wouldn't it be more Christ-like to go and be like, oh, talk to these young women, say like, our families will take your children in if that's really what you care about. We'll pay for your medical. We'll do all of this. And literally after I do this whole thing with him, he's like, yeah, that's too much work. He literally told me that. I mean, not in front of anybody else, but he told me in my face, oh, that's too much work. So essentially picketing and shaming people, that's God's work. Caring for the children and the women that are in these situations, it's inconvenient. And, he kind of said the quiet part out loud, but it's what so many folks, I think, are in that weird dichotomy of, this is evil. All right, well, if you think it's evil, how could you fix it? I don't want to fix it. It's too much work.
Sounds about Republican.
Yeah.
Because, they only need, and I just want to remind people that there is no national religion. The last time that I checked, this is not like the Middle East or something where we are officially the Nation of Islam or everyone here is a Muslim. The United States is not supposed to be that way. Everyone here, this is not a Christian nation. I don't really like the fact that we have God on money and his name is invoked. Personally, I liked hearing about God because I follow him, but at the same time, we don't have a national religion. And so really, I think everyone should be left to themselves. But
well, and God We Trust wasn't even added to the money until like the 50s. So I mean, again, like, this is when they get all mad, like, oh no, it's this recent history, you guys. You've been a bunch of D-bags about this.
And I'm sure there was some sort of political advantage to that at the time, because they wouldn't have just done that out of a love for God. Because
even that, I mean, how you hear us talk about it, how like prayer's been taken out of school. This is what's burned me. How do you take prayer out of school? Like, are you like, oh wait, hey Johnny, your eyes are closed. Are you praying? Stop it. Maybe they took public prayer out of school, which public prayer a lot of times is fairly useless. I feel like it's just pageantry and speeches, but they don't understand even what they're saying, I think, anymore.
And the thing that gets me about like the Republicans and the evangelicals, as you're saying, they only want to take their agenda as far as it goes to achieve whatever their end goal is, which is to be reelected. So ban this, ban that. Okay, I have more power. Fuck them if we care. That same mindset, people who are on drugs, people who have certain sicknesses and stuff like that, let's just be against it. Let's just lock them up and stuff, mental health issues, but we're not really going to fix it. Like, it's absolutely senseless to me, like in my case, to lock me in jail for carrying a bunch of meth on me or for getting caught high or whatever the reasons people may be in there, but you're not going to rehabilitate me for all that time. I'm just going to get it back out and do the same shit. So, but when these people, these Republicans and these supposed Christians, all their talk is always about how they can change someone else. I never hear them say, and in at least in no sincere way, they talk about their relationship with God, how they love him or what the Spirit is doing in their life and, what's going on with them. It's always about how we can go and fuck with people over here.
Yep.
But the Lord already told them that there's going to be many people that says to him in that day, talking about when they stand before the judgment throne, we cast out devils in your name and we did this and we fucked with this person and we banned this. And the Lord told you that he's going to tell you to depart from him, because you never knew him. You were too busy putting your energy into changing other people that you never bothered to cultivate a true relationship with the Lord.
I think you're right. I mean, I think in so many ways, and that's been one of like growing up as a kid around church, you learn how to do church. Like you learn how to act, you learn how you're supposed to show up and do. And then even working in ministry for years, it was like, again, it's a higher level of knowing what you have to do. But some of the biggest growth I've had is that internal work. You know, it's that internal space, and it's not about performing. It's not about that. Some of it is about, yeah, about seeking the God of the universe. Some of it's about learning to heal broken places within me, and being able to do the work to process through all of that. But I think it takes a lot of contemplation and introspection, which I again, I don't feel like a lot of modern day Christianity, at least in America, pushes a lot of contemplation and deep thought, and also they do a terrible job with mental health, because a lot of time it's just pray it away. You're depressed, we'll pray for you. That's not going to always fix things. Sometimes you need to go to a counselor, and that's okay. Or a therapist, yeah.
Right. That's like that shit. There was a politician some damn where, and there was like a shooting that happened, and like, or maybe they had like a really bad trouble with like people getting shot, but this one lady's son had got shot like in his neck when a bullet came in the house, and this politician, I think it was in Kentucky, you know, he got on TV and he was like, I have a solution. We're all gonna pray. And
yeah. That's been one thing that has like gotten me, like for the longest time. I think prayer had been set up as some sort of like almost like a just dropping a penny in like a fountain kind of a thing. And one thing I've grown in, as I've kind of grown processing myself spiritually and kind of walking with God, is that if we're praying for a problem that we can already fix, I think God's going to be like, why are you talking to me about this? You know what I mean? Like, you have it within you already to do it. You're just being lazy and you don't want to do it. And we'd rather just punt and just say, all right, God's going to do it, because it makes us feel better for the moment.
But, you know, yeah. So much of what, you know, the churches preach these days is about like either against people or the acquisition of things. And so, which still takes your attention outside of yourself. But you know, the Lord said that you can gain the whole world and lose your soul. He said you can take a whole city and not be able to control yourself. There's so many warnings, you know, in the Bible about being mindful about, you know, redirecting your attention, getting back to center. So don't get so caught up on going knocking on people's doors, trying to convert them, or trying to go and get rich, you know, when you forsake the thing that's the most important, which is your own damn self-improvement. And so, I don't know, the Lord already has beat this dead horse all throughout all the scriptures. I don't think Republicans really read the fucking Bible, but I don't know. It's already been said. Either y'all hard-headed asses are gonna listen, or you not. And when I say y'all's hard-headed asses, I'm not talking about my base, you know, my beautiful listeners and my audience. I'm talking about the conservative person who happened to cross this show. You know, and that's
who ends up seeing like being able to use scripture as a weapon against people, which it was never meant to be that way. We've got clobber passages. We've got all sorts of other stuff that people use scripture, and it's not meant to be used in that way.
But when people are insecure and shit, and they're not whole on the inside, then that's just a form of abuse. You know, they may not be taking their fists and punching someone in the face, but using a scripture to punch someone in the spirit or in the heart is still abuse. And so,
well, and so much of that's taught where there's just like, I think we make everything so binary, like you're good or you're bad. Like this is either good or bad. And we take like any kind of gray thinking or any middle ground or context out of situations, because a lot of folks read scripture without context, which is a terrible way to read scripture, without understanding what else is happening. Like, what is the author trying to convey? All those kind of things. But I feel like that we get taught to do all of this. And then at some point, if we're just told we're all sinful, we're all terrible, and God's not happy with us, well, I can see a system where people be like, well, I don't sin, or quote unquote sin like he does, so I can really push that because it makes me feel better. And then the worst folks that would say that, and again, quote unquote sin, because I think that we've used sin very incorrectly in lots of different ways, but where people be like, yes, I don't struggle with that, but I really do struggle with that. And I don't like what you're doing with your lifestyle, even though I really want to live that lifestyle. So somehow I'm going to continue to do this and just be a big effing hypocrite in the whole process. So rinse and repeat for American Christianity.
I want you to talk about, from the documentary, you were talking about how Oral Roberts had laid hands on you trying to heal you of asthma. And I think he forced you to lay on the ground. I've had this happen to me before at certain churches, but you actually were not healed of asthma. And give people background on who Oral Roberts is.
I'll give you just a snippet of my background. Again, I told you conservative, but when I was 3 years old, I had a sister that was born that was severely like autistic. And especially back in the 80s, nobody knew what to do with it. So my mom's answer is, we got to get her healed, right? We have to fix this, because that's what we do. We want to have like a nice little middle-class family. We need to fix it. So she would drag me around, because my dad wouldn't go because he was a good conservative, but she would drag me around with her and my sister to tent meetings, revivals. Eventually we end up with Oral Roberts again. Kind of prosperity preacher before the time kind of a thing back in the day, but again, grifty and all sorts of other fun stuff. And so then I found myself, I think I'm probably about 7 at the time. I was a kid, grew up with asthma, and my mom just like shoves me in line. Doesn't tell me anything. She just shoves me in this line to like get marched up on the stage. And I figure out what's happening. But again, I'm standing there and they're like, do like the hand to the head, like, and asthma, you're healed. Because what they did is they asked me what my problem was, and I had a card on my hand, and I had to write down asthma. So like I hand it to a dude, he whispers to Oral, and then which again, that name, I just feel so weird about it anyways, but it just feels like a pet name. He had a whole background. I don't know. Continuing on. But yeah, Oral Roberts, so yeah, whispers asthma, grabs my head, pushes me back. And I'm not trying to be like, I was a kid wanting to be like, I want God to heal me. And he pushes me back, and I just step back. And I keep standing there because I'm like, I don't feel any different. And then, so it happened like a few times eventually, to where they had these guys kind of like, they pushed me where they kind of made sure they caught me and pulled me back because, hey man, he's healed. And I'm like, I knew as a 7-year-old, I need my inhaler. I'm not healed. But then the answer from my mother was, oh, you just didn't have enough faith, which is the loophole that they put you into that trap with. If it didn't work, not my fault. It's yours. You didn't have enough faith. Which again is hugely abusive, especially to children and actually any human, to say that, yeah, if only you had enough faith, God would have fixed you, but not. Sucks to be you.
It reminds me of a lot of bullshit that I heard when I was watching again another documentary on Netflix, the Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey documentary.
Is that good? I haven't dipped my toes in that one yet.
I binged the whole damn thing. You dip your toes, your dick, and everything else in it. It is worthy.
Okay, thank you.
And that documentary, y'all, was about the I think the Fellowship of Latter-day Saints, Jeff's, them people and people living off in seclusion and, having 50 wives and a shitload of children and everything like that and so on and so forth.
They're the folks that even the normal Mormons are like, those folks are crazy. Which
So tell me about the time. And speaking of documentaries, look, if there's any documentarians running around out there, you can come recruit me because I'm ready to spill all kinds of tea. I'm ready to run my mouth and talk. I ain't shy about shit. I'm ready to go on some documentaries.
Right. This is audition tape right here.
I will use it. It worked for Steve Harvey before he had all of his 5 businesses and shows. Now, when he was still doing stand-up and stuff, whenever he had a camera in front of him, he just looked to the camera and said, "Hey, you people who control the shows, I want a talk show. I want," he looked into whatever camera was in front of him and said what the fuck he wanted, and he got it. So yes, I want to be on documentaries. I want my talk shows. I want book deals. Give me everything. Fuck it. Tell me about the time you smuggled a camera into the Trinity Broadcasting Network.
Okay, so I This is part of me being probably a countercultural Christian, even back when I was in the mix of it. So I'd worked for an evangelistic organization where we worked with like at-risk street kids type of stuff. And so the whole goal is that we're supposed to just evangelize them and send them to the kingdom. But that never sat right with me, because I was like, what are we inviting them into? Like, just pray a prayer so you're not going to hell? And then no, I was like, it needs to be, you're inviting someone into something greater, like a different way of doing it. And so I took some of these kids, they're like street kids, which is hilarious. Like, you're taking them down to do missions work in LA. So, so their whole idea is, I'm spending my spring break helping other people that are doing it. And so I'm like, yes. So when I took them down there, I was like, I know TBN's around here. And I told them, I was like, I just want to take you into the thing that is absolutely not Christianity. None of this has anything to do with Christianity. And so they let us in. I didn't even really smuggle it that much. It was mainly just the idea where I think the guy at the door was like, oh, I'm such a fan. I love this, and everything in here is so great. So I just essentially just lied. And so he let us with a group of kids in, because I was like, oh, we want to show the youth of America how wonderful this is at TBN Studios. And it led me to walking around and mocking everything on video that I was seeing, because it is nuts. Spray painted gold toilets, all the other stuff. Like, it's gross. It was like, yeah, it was like Liberace had an orgasm somewhere, and it is TBN. Like, everything is painted gold. Everything was just over the top, like decadent in ways that you're kind of like, what is this, Vegas? It really felt like Vegas more than it did any kind of a Christian ministry. But like cheap Vegas, whatever that is. Like, we're faking Vegas. So it's more like Reno, I guess.
But that's a part of that hypnotherapy, though. So the basis or conditioning, it's all a part of hypnotherapy. And in hypnotherapy, all it means is to overload the conscious mind so that you can gain access to the subconscious. And you do that by simply making the conscious mind focus on more than one thing, because the conscious mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And so if you've got all of this crazy fake opulent shit going on, and bitches running around with faces full of clown makeup, and the shouting and the hollering and the music, you don't have no ability to be critical unless you intend to be critical. You are in conscious overload, and then that's how you become suggestible, as we call it in hypnotherapy. Your mind is now in a suggestible state, and you will receive what's being presented to you with much less criticism, if any at all.
Did you just describe a Sunday morning service? It's hypnotherapy. I'm joking. But it almost, I mean, that's the whole idea. We condition you to be receptive to what we're saying in a weird manipulative way. I feel like church ends up kind of doing that in their own controlling, non-controlling way.
You know what? Having this discussion right now makes me think about that chant that Joel does before each time he preaches. So he'll get his Bible and wave it around, and the whole church will chant with him. And he'll say, "This is my Bible. I have what it says I have. I am what it says I am." And he'll say, my mind is open, my heart is receptive, I'm about to receive, and then there's this whole thing. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's, it was he was hypnotizing us the whole time. It seems like an innocent group chant and everything like that. But now the shit seems really culty when I look back on it. Why you can't just get up there and say what the fuck you got to say? Why you got to have us chant with you to say that we're now going to be vulnerable to what you want to say?
But it's about Brandon, and it's about keep bringing you back every week. It's again, you mentioned being a drug dealer. This is kind of being like a holy drug dealer, but it's never going to get you what you want. But it's only going to give you that taste and keep you coming back every Sunday.
With promises of what could be.
Yeah. Yes. You're wanting to achieve something that, and if you haven't achieved it, it's on you. So that's a perfect way to set up a grift. So if you have any problems, it's probably between you and God.
Right? There's no accountability. There's no if you fuck up, this is going to be your punishment, or if you don't do a good job, this is going to be your punishment. There isn't any of that. So they can get up there, speak for 20 minutes, and then make a fortune every time they sell a book, and they really haven't done that much. And when people, but their audience doesn't demand it of them either, because that's just how easy a sell Christian people are. But so in this documentary, I want to talk about this. That we're gonna talk about one of your podcast episodes that
Sure.
stood out to me, and then we'll wrap it up. Um, kind of like a big part of this, the shade against the evangelicals was that how they're supposed to be all Christiany, and how opposite of that Trump is. One of the funniest parts. It would be funny if it wasn't so damn serious. They were comparing Jesus and Trump. One of those damn comedians that has like a late night show. He was like, Jesus, healed the sick. Trump grabs women by the pussy.
Yeah.
Jesus, pray for the babies. Trump wants to fuck his daughter. Whatever the case might be. And the evangelicals were like, okay, but he'll still get our agenda forward, so we'll overlook all of the pussy grabbing and the daughter fucking and the paying off of the whores and everything like that. Well, what do you think about how non-Christian Trump is and how he was embraced by evangelicals? So this got me thinking that evangelicals are just like a church of Satan cloaked in a cross.
I think that what happened was around that time, it was probably that probably shifted because I've been doing my radio show for a while, but that was, I think, even Trump entering the scene somehow like laser focused me in a different way with my snark, where I was just kind of going like, how? Wait, okay, I know evangelicals are full of bullshit, but this is a whole mountain range of bullshit that I don't even understand how you sleep at night trying to talk about how he's God's chosen. It's hilarious, but it was like, it was for me flabbergasting. I was just going like, none of this makes any bit of sense, but it does. I think at the end of the day, if evangelicals want power, Jesus never told them to go after power. I mean, this kind of reminds me of the Old Testament a bit, where it's Samuel the prophet. Samuel's like, goes to God and he's like, the people want a king, and then God's like, no, it's fine. Let's keep this whole judges system we have here. And they're like, no, the people really want a king. And he's like, all right, let them enjoy Saul. And Saul was a nutbag. But it's what the people thought they wanted. They wanted that. They wanted to be led in that way. They wanted to be able to say, we want someone that leads us so we don't have to think and we feel good about ourselves. And I feel like that Trump was the opposite of everything Jesus was. And I feel like it gave a lot of Christians a weird like hard on towards, yeah, we can give it back to him now. Like, not enough of this Jesus stuff. Jesus, he's a little bit of a pussy. He's a little bit of a hippie here. But, we like King Jesus. We like this idea of Jesus on the throne, being a badass, and that's what we want. And so they want more of the kick ass and takes names kind of a situation of Jesus. They don't really want the Jesus that existed. Or also, like, maybe we want some more Old Testament wrath. We want some more of that because that's tasty for us. Because the people we don't like get killed. We like that. So yeah, it really just feels like they've regressed in many ways.
That's what happens when people don't have peace in their hearts. You can't appreciate the God who is the still small voice. He already told you this before. He said the fire broke out outside the mountain, but God was not in the fire, and the winds and all the storms, but God wasn't in any of all the crazy shit. He didn't appear until all was silent.
Silence makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah, when you're wrecked on the inside.
Oh, absolutely. But like, to think of like, yeah, but I mean, I can't think of many services actually having like, yet. We don't teach people about meditation and about contemplation and about digging deeper into ourselves, because I think they're afraid of what would happen. So we condition people to be whatever we say a Christian is in this box. We check off all the little markers and we're like, good, qualification done. Move along. Make sure they're tithing. And now they feel like they're going to heaven. And that's all that matters to us.
I just did one of my solo dolo episodes, which solo dolo is just how you say by your damn self. Shout out to Kid Cudi, and everybody out there. So and I was talking about that, how you don't actually have to tithe, and you're not going to go to hell, and you're not actually going to be cursed if you don't tithe. And I talked about all that, so I'm very happy you said that. And so
yeah, I mean, Jesus, I mean, that's all Christ talks about is the heart, man. Like, it's just, what's in front of you? What, like, are there people in your arena that are suffering that need help? well, then that's, if you claim to be a follower of Christ, go help them. Don't ask them questions, just go help them. You're not trying to fix them. You're trying to just be some sort of taste of heaven, and a lot of times what life can be like is hell. So I feel like we're just trying to give them a bit of taste of heaven and kindness and grace and compassion, because the world's hard.
But just remember, the Lord said, if you don't show mercy, he said, if you show mercy, you will receive mercy. But if you do not show mercy, then you will receive judgment without mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of your episodes from the Snarky Faith podcast and radio show was called Nitty Gritty Faith. And I felt like the title was most befitting to your general personality and everything like that, as I have gleaned so far. You talked about 3 things in there that stood out to me. You talked about, it was like a woman who was like raped, molested or something like that, but she didn't want to go to the church and she knew they wouldn't believe her anyway. Something bad happened between her and a guy.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about what Denzel had watched and had to say about the Will Smith slap heard around the world. And then and then the last thing, you talked about Brian Houston and Hillsong and how he quote unquote fell to temptation, which that was tied to the Denzel thing, because you're talking about people blaming Satan for every damn thing. So
yeah.
is there anything you would like to say further about these things?
First of all, I wasn't really picking on Denzel, but I did not like the idea that you took away accountability in that situation. So that was like, don't put that on. Oh, no, don't do that. Like, Will did what Will wanted to do. And let's just let that be. Those were Will's actions. He did it. Let's not blame it on something else. And like, yeah, with the whole Hillsong thing, that is a documentary that is just gross to watch. But again, you're right. Like, it isn't like, oh, I fell from temptation. It's kind of like, no, you've been like, you fell, like there was no, you somehow like got rid of whatever goodness was left in you. It's almost like the inverse of falling from temptation. It was just kind of like whatever bit of spine you had, you sold that crap out and said, I'm doing this for Jesus. And the other one that I can't remember what the other one is. I have a weird, I don't know if you have this problem. I will end up doing a show and I almost have amnesia afterwards. After I crank out a show, I have to either have taken notes or I don't remember much of it. But I've been around situations where, yes, in churches where people have tried to cover up stuff. And it's sick that happens, and it's sick that they sweep it under the floor, because when that happens, they're caring about the church more than they're actually caring about the human being. And when a church becomes an institution and not a group of people, that becomes very problematic in the church, period, to begin with. Because if Jesus tells us we're supposed to go love others, and as soon as you turn a church America style, you set up a church, it is set up like a business. And when even if it's a nonprofit, and any business or organization, their first need is money and survival. So from that one moment, you've said that the church cares about keeping the church alive, not about serving others around us, if that makes any sense. It's kind of a weird way to think about it, but I feel like that's how we've fallen away. People serve the church doesn't serve the people.
Precisely. And the church they're so rotten at their core, because they like to pick and choose about this. So they want to pay their staff members like the world. They say, we want to give you a corporate salary because there's no reason why you should be paid less because you're at a church. We want to pay you the same way you would be paid if you were in a secular company at a Fortune 500 company. And so, but you're filing as a nonprofit, you're not paying taxes. So you don't want to pay your fair share, but you want to act like you're a regular business. And then when travesties happen, you want to go and take free money from the government too.
Yep. I mean, it's it's all just like, hey, come on, we'll take more. We'll keep taking more. We'll take more. But I will say this, I have, on the flip side of it, there are those that are like Lakewood. I feel like I've been on the other end of it, where churches pay people slave labor and just say well, you're doing it for God. That's kind of the reward that you've got to. So I've never, I don't know if it's either because of talent, ability, or there's this thing in me that would probably hate myself, but I've always steered clear of those places where I felt like to take that next step up, it would mean me having to swallow down a fair amount of myself to do that, and I don't want my children to be able to see that, because I think that's disgusting, and I don't want to see that in myself either.
Well, congratulations to you, sir, for maintaining the possession of both your nutsack and your spine through all that you have been through, because
They've been hit quite a bit, but yeah, they're still intact.
because Republicans and all them people don't have either anymore. They're nutless, spineless, and they're just Gollum invaders. That's all they are. They have power and no soul. So that wraps up what I wanted to cover with you today. I hope everyone checks out the In God We Trump documentary. I hope everyone checks out snarkyfaith.com, which is this man's website. He's on Facebook, he's on Instagram. All this is going to go in the showy notes, as it always does. Is there anything you would like to say, Stuart? Anything at all?
No, I love one thing. I like interacting with people. So, one, I may have said something ridiculously stupid here on the show, and if you have a question about it, you can reach out to me and ask me about it. Or otherwise, I like dialoguing with people. It's for me, after kind of escaping institutional like Christianity and trying to be able to do that on my own, I've learned that engaging others that don't think like us is incredibly rewarding. I used to hold meetings in pubs where we would, at the beginning, since we're in the South, so you'd have atheists show up trying to like mess with our meetings. We weren't trying to evangelize, we were trying to get people to talk, and they'd eventually get pissed at me because my whole point was, oh, that's a really good, I understand where you're coming from, that's a good point, yeah, tell me more. And so those kind of things. So I enjoy spiritual conversations with people from all different walks of life. So if anyone wants to reach out, find me. You're right, I'm findable online. I believe I'm the only Stuart Delony in existence right now in the world. So if you can't find me, that's on you. Not you, listener, you.
All right. Thank you so much, Stuart, for coming on the show. May the blessings be upon you.
Amen.